One of the most common phrases that we hear these days on television and in the media is peaceful protester.
It is not, generally speaking, unruly.
Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protesters.
Peaceful protest. Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protest.
Peaceful protest. Peaceful protest.
This phrase is repeated like such a mantra that you would think that the two words just sort of naturally go together. And yet if we then look at the footage of what's actually happening in Portland and other cities, we're not seeing protests, we're seeing riots.
Protests started at about noon today in Seattle, but turned destructive right around 4 p.m. Since then, we have seen widespread looting and destruction downtown.
And so it may be worth thinking about the difference between a protester and a rioter. Protests are the kind of thing we had in the civil rights movement. And the point of a protest is to raise an objection. That's what the word means. Protests are aimed at stirring the conscience of a nation. In that sense, they are inherently democratic. They're an appeal to people to see things in a different light. One may say that protest is based on the idea that right makes might. The power, if you will, of conscience. That's what the protester is trying to communicate through the power of words. But now we turn to the riot, which is the opposite. A riot is based on the idea that might makes right. The rioter isn't trying to appeal to anyone. In fact, typically the rioter doesn't say anything. The rioter just does things like throw bricks and rocks and beat people up and push the cops. If the rioter says anything, it's usually obscenities. And riots, being a demonstration of force, obviously invite counterforce. The cops then push back, they hit back. And then of course the rioter goes, ouch, 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 what are you doing? How dare you? But of course when you speak the language of violence, what do you expect? But violence in return. A riot is kind of a failed revolution. The rioters, if they could, would overthrow the country using force. In this sense, they are profoundly anti-democratic. But because riots use the language of force, the best way to meet them is with superior force. And by this, I mean nothing more than the enforcement of law, holding these thugs accountable, and then ultimately also going after the people who fund them, who plan these riots, who collaborate with them. Abraham Lincoln once said, "Must I shoot the simple soldier boy who deserts while I leave untouched the wily deserter who incites him to desert?" The inciters of these Antifa and Black Lives Matter thugs are in the media and in Hollywood and in the mayor's office. Ultimately, it's not just the thugs on the street, but these thugs that need to be held accountable as well.